She wasn't supposed to notice the way I looked at her. And I wasn't supposed to notice how her perfume lingered long after she left the room, like a question waiting for an answer I wasn't brave enough to give. The first time we met, it was nothing dramatic. Just an ordinary Tuesday, a quiet office, and the sound of rain threading down the glass. She stood by the window, reviewing a file, her reading glasses sliding down the bridge of her nose. When she looked up, her eyes met mine, calm, steady, but with something underneath. Something that made my chest tighten before I even understood why. Her name was Elena. She was the kind of woman people automatically respected, not because she demanded it, but because everything about her carried the weight of someone who had already lived through storms and didn't need to prove she'd survived. Her movements were deliberate, her words measured. But sometimes, in the pauses between them, I'd catch something softer. A breath too long. A gaze that lingered where it shouldn't. I was new. Still learning the rhythm of the place. But she made everything feel slowed down, as if the whole world waited for her before deciding what to do next. When she handed me a folder that morning, our fingers brushed. It was nothing, should have been nothing. But the contact felt alive. Her hand was cool, elegant, and I swear I could feel the faint tremor of hesitation before she pulled away. She cleared her throat, looked down, and said, "Make sure this one doesn't get misplaced." I nodded, pretending to read the label, though my pulse was already betraying me. Throughout the day, I kept finding small excuses to talk to her, to ask about a file, a report, anything that would make her look up again. Sometimes she'd answer quickly, dismissively. Other times, she'd pause before responding, as if debating whether to let the air between us settle or ripple again. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped, but the sky outside was still dim and heavy, the kind of gray that made reflections look sharper against the glass. She was standing by her desk, hair slightly undone from the day, light catching the faint lines near her mouth. She looked tired, but in that beautiful, human way that made you want to say something kind and never quite manage it. "You should go home," she said when she noticed me still at my desk. "You've been here since morning." "So have you," I replied before I could stop myself. That made her smile, just barely. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, but warms the space between two people anyway. "Occupational hazard," she said softly, gathering her papers. Her tone was neutral, but her eyes lingered on me a second longer than they should have. When she moved past my chair, her hand brushed the back of it, light, accidental, but deliberate enough that I didn't believe it was a mistake. I didn't move. I just sat there, pretending to read an email, but my focus had already unraveled. I could still feel the ghost of her touch, cool skin, a trace of perfume, and something unsaid that filled the silence. She stopped by the doorway, one hand on the frame, as if deciding whether to say something. Her shoulders rose with a breath, then dropped again. "Good night," she said finally, but it came out softer than she meant it to. Before I could answer, a knock echoed from the hallway. Another voice, a man's, called her name. She turned slightly, her expression tightening, the warmth vanishing in an instant. Then she looked back at me, just once, and in that single glance was everything she didn't say. Then she was gone. And I sat there, staring at the doorway, wondering when exactly professional had stopped being an option. She didn't come in the next day. Or the one after that. The office felt hollow without her, like someone had turned down the brightness and no one noticed but me. Her empty chair faced the window, papers still stacked neatly in her tray. I caught myself looking at it more often than I should have, waiting for the faint click of her heels in the hallway. When she finally returned, 3 days later, it was as if nothing had changed, except everything had. "Elena," I said before I could think better of it. She glanced up, her expression polite, controlled. "Morning," she murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her voice was softer than usual, but her eyes looked tired, as if sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford. Later, over coffee in the break room, she mentioned, almost offhandedly, that her mother had been unwell. The words came out steady, but she kept stirring her coffee long after the sugar had dissolved. "Hospitals make you think about things you'd rather not," she said. "About what's left." And what isn't? I didn't know what to say, only that the quiet between her sentences felt heavy enough to make my chest ache. For the first time, I saw her not as the composed professional who always had the right answer, but as someone deeply, quietly human. After that, something shifted. She started calling me by my first name. Daniel. Always low, always deliberate, like she was testing how it felt on her tongue. And every time she said it, I felt it somewhere deeper than I should have. We worked late again one evening. Everyone else had left. The light from her desk lamp was warm, spilling over the papers scattered between us. "You don't have to stay," she said. "I know," I said. "But I want to." She hesitated, then smiled faintly, almost to herself. "You'll regret that when you realize how dull I can be." Somehow I doubt that. She didn't look at me right away, but when she finally did, her gaze lingered, long enough that the hum of the air conditioner became the only sound in the room. When she reached across to hand me a pen, her fingers brushed mine again. This time, neither of us moved. Her touch was cool, careful, but there was a tremor, a hesitation that betrayed her. "I shouldn't," she began, then stopped. "Neither should I," I said quietly. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Only the faintest sigh escaped, the kind that carries too much meaning to explain. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere distant, and the lights flickered once. She leaned closer, instinctively, her shoulder brushing mine. The contact was brief, a heartbeat, maybe two, but enough to dissolve the careful space we'd been pretending existed. She didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. Her breath touched my cheek when she spoke, barely above a whisper. "Daniel, you should go." But her voice trembled, and for the first time, I realized she didn't really want me to. When I finally stood, the chair legs scraped softly against the floor. She turned her head, as if she wanted to say something, to stop me, but stayed silent. I paused at the door, looked back once. She was still there, motionless, staring at the place where my hand had been on the desk. And in that silence, something between us quietly changed, not spoken, not agreed upon, but undeniably real. That IT started with something small, a late meeting that should have ended an hour earlier. Everyone else had gone home, their laughter fading down the corridor, leaving only the hum of the ceiling lights and the slow tick of the clock. Elena sat across from me, half turned toward the window, one hand resting against her temple. The lamplight softened her features, tracing the faint lines near her eyes, the curve of her mouth. I'd seen her look tired before, but never like this, never like she was letting herself be seen. "You should go home," she said quietly. I almost smiled. "You always say that when you're the one who won't leave." Her eyes lifted to mine, slow, deliberate. "Maybe I like the quiet after everyone's gone." "So do I." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, alive. She reached for her pen, then stopped when our hands brushed again. It wasn't an accident this time, it couldn't have been. Her hand lingered, the warmth of her skin seeping into mine. "Daniel," she said softly, warning and apology tangled in the sound. I swallowed, my pulse too loud in my ears. "You don't have to, I know." She cut me off, her voice barely audible. "But if I don't, someone will get hurt." She started to pull back, but before she could, her phone buzzed on the desk, loud, sharp, like a slap in the quiet. She flinched, glanced at the screen. A man's name flashed across it, Mark. She silenced it instantly, her expression tightening into something unreadable. "I should take this," she whispered, but she didn't move. Her phone buzzed again. She turned it face down. "You don't have to explain," I said, though I wanted her to. Her eyes softened, and that was worse than anger. "It's not what you think," she said, voice shaking slightly. "But it's also not something I can pretend away." Before I could respond, footsteps echoed from the hallway, voices, faint but moving closer. She stiffened instantly. "Someone's coming," she whispered, standing too quickly. "You should," too late. The door opened. Maya from HR poked her head in. Oh, sorry, didn't realize anyone was still here. Her eyes flicked between us, the scattered papers, the dim light, how close we were standing. Elena's tone turned professional so fast it almost hurt. Just finalizing a report. Daniel was helping. Of course, Maya said, her smile polite, curious. See you both tomorrow. When the door closed again, the silence felt sharper than before. Elena exhaled, pressing a hand to her forehead. This is exactly why what? I asked softly. She looked up at me, eyes glistening, conflicted. Why I shouldn't let you stay. But neither of us moved. The rain had started again outside, tapping softly against the glass. I could see her reflection there, the faint outline of her face, her lips slightly parted. She turned toward me, close enough that I could feel her breath against my jaw. I don't even know what we're doing, she whispered. Neither do I said. But I can't seem to stop. For a long, suspended moment, the air between us felt like a single fragile thread, one movement, one breath, and it would snap. Then, as if drawn by something neither of us could name, she stepped closer. Her hand rose, almost touching my face, then faltering, hovering near my cheek. My breath caught. We didn't kiss. We didn't speak. We just stood there, suspended in something that felt dangerously like truth. And when she finally pulled away, her hand trembled. We can't, she said, but it sounded like a plea instead of a boundary. It had been a week since that almost moment, the one that left a hum under my skin every time I thought about her. We hadn't talked about it. We hadn't even looked at each other the same way. She'd built her walls higher, I'd learned to pretend I didn't see through the cracks. But pretending only worked when she wasn't near me. That evening, the storm outside was unrelenting, thunder rolling like a warning, windows streaked with water. Most of the staff had gone home early, the office half-lit and humming with the low, steady rhythm of rain. Elena was still there, her light the only one on in the corridor. I told myself I was just dropping off the revised report. But my heart knew better. When I stepped into her office, she didn't look up. You're still here. I could say the same about you, I said quietly. Her lips curved, not quite a smile. You don't know when to leave, do you? Maybe I don't want to. She looked up then, and something in her eyes flickered. Not irritation. Not surprise. Something far more dangerous. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the air thick with everything unsaid. I could hear the rain, the low hum of the desk lamp, the uneven rhythm of our breathing. Finally, she stood. Daniel, she started, her tone firmer than before. Whatever this is, it has to stop. Why? The word came out sharper than I meant. Because people will talk. Because I make you feel something you don't want to admit? Her breath caught, barely audible. That's not fair, she whispered. Neither is pretending you don't feel it too. She stepped closer before she realized it, instinct, habit, magnetism. I could smell her perfume, faint and warm. Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk, as if to ground herself. You're young, she said, the words trembling despite her effort to sound composed. You don't understand how easily something like this breaks people. Then let it break me, I said. Just don't keep pretending it's nothing. Her eyes glistened, the softest crack in her control. She turned away, running a hand through her hair. You shouldn't say things like that. Then tell me you don't want to hear them. Silence. Only the rain answered. I moved closer, slow, careful, until I was standing right behind her. My voice came out low, unsteady. You keep saying we can't. But you never tell me you don't want to. Her breath hitched when I reached out, fingers brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't move. Elena, I murmured, the sound of her name almost lost in the storm. She turned then, sudden, desperate, her eyes locking on mine, searching, fighting. The distance between us vanished, the heat of her body a whisper away. I don't want to, she breathed. But I can't stop thinking about you. Her confession hung between us, raw, fragile, irreversible. The storm outside cracked, light flashing through the window. Her hand rose to my chest, not pushing me away, not pulling me closer, just trembling against me. I leaned in, barely, just enough that our breaths touched, just enough to feel the world tilt towards something inevitable. Then, a sharp knock on the door. We froze. Her hand dropped. Her eyes widened, panic flickering through the haze of want. Come in, she managed, her voice barely steady. The door handle turned. And everything we hadn't said burned quietly in the space between us. The knock that night had come from him. Mark. The name that had flashed on her phone weeks ago, the name she'd silenced before explaining. He'd walked in carrying that familiar ease of someone who thought he still belonged there. Elena, he said, too casual, like he'd said it 100 times before. Didn't expect to find you still here. Her posture changed immediately, shoulders straight, face composed. But her hand, resting on the desk, trembled just slightly. I was just finishing up, she said, her voice calm, distant. Mark glanced at me, polite but curious. You're new, right? Daniel, isn't it? I nodded, unsure what to do with my hands, my voice, my entire presence. Yes, sir. Just helping out with the reports. He smiled, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Good man. He turned back to her. I left your jacket in the car. Thought you might want it back. Her expression barely shifted, but something in her eyes flickered, shame, maybe, or regret. You didn't have to. Old habits, he said softly, before leaving the jacket on her chair and stepping out. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was unbearable. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. But the air felt colder, tighter, every second stretching into something fragile and cruel. Finally, she exhaled, voice low. He's my ex-husband. I nodded, even though I already knew. Something about the way she'd silenced that call, it had never felt like a stranger. You still talk, I said quietly. Only when necessary. She paused, her fingers tightening around the edge of the desk. He thinks we might still, she stopped. It's complicated. It always was. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the faint trace of rain on her hair. You don't owe me an explanation. Her gaze snapped up to mine, raw, tired, vulnerable. Maybe I do. You should know what you're getting pulled into. I shook my head. I already am. Her breath caught, a small, shaky sound she didn't mean to make. She turned away, but I saw her reflection in the dark window, her hand rising to her lips, as if holding something back. He still thinks he has a place in my life, she said finally. And maybe that's my fault. I let him think that because it's easier than admitting I've moved on. The words hit like a slow burn. Moved on, I echoed, voice rough. To what? She hesitated, just long enough to make it an answer. To you, she said. I didn't move. Couldn't. The room felt too small, the air too thin. Then she turned fully toward me, no hesitation now, no pretense. Her hand brushed my sleeve, trailing down until her fingers found mine. This isn't safe, she whispered, stepping closer. But nothing about you has felt safe since the day you walked in. I could feel her pulse through her hand, fast and unsteady. The edge of her voice cracked, her control dissolving. So maybe stop pretending, I said, my words barely more than breath. Her eyes searched mine, for logic, for restraint, for a reason to stop. She didn't find one. And when the storm outside flared again, she didn't pull away this time. She only closed the space between us, her forehead resting against mine, not a kiss, not yet, but a decision made in silence. The night they stopped pretending, the world outside seemed to hold its breath. The storm had passed, leaving behind a soaked, shimmering silence. The office smelled faintly of rain and paper, that mix of clean and heavy air that makes you notice every heartbeat. Elena stood by the window, arms folded across her chest, the glow from the city lights tracing her silhouette. I could see her reflection, calm on the surface, but her fingers were trembling. "Do you ever think about what happens after?" she asked quietly. "After what?" "After we stop fighting it." Her voice wavered on that last word. Fighting. As if naming it made it real. I moved closer, slow enough that she could stop me if she wanted to. She didn't. "Maybe that's the problem," I said. "We keep thinking there has to be an after." She turned then, facing me fully. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the air vent, the faint ticking of her watch. "Daniel," she said, my name soft, almost a warning. "If we cross this line, there's no way back." "I know." Her breath caught, a small, unguarded sound. "You shouldn't want this." "Maybe not," I said. "But I do." I could feel the tension between us, thick, magnetic, alive. When I reached up, she didn't pull away. My fingers brushed a strand of hair from her face, tucking it behind her ear. Her skin was warm beneath my hand, her pulse racing just under it. She closed her eyes for half a second, a quiet surrender. "You don't understand," she whispered. "This could ruin everything." I stepped closer, until the edge of her desk pressed lightly against my thigh, until our breath mingled in the air between us. "Then tell me to stop." Her eyes opened, bright, conflicted, alive. She didn't speak. Her hand came up, resting against my chest, not pushing, not pulling, just there. "Tell me," I said again, barely audible. She shook her head. "I can't." Her fingers curled in the fabric of my shirt, knuckles white. The room seemed to collapse inward, shrinking until there was nothing left but her eyes and the sound of our breathing. "You scare me," she said suddenly. "Because you make me feel like I could start over. And I don't know if I have it in me to begin again." I took her hand, pressed it gently against my heart. "Then don't start over," I whispered. "Just start here." Something in her expression broke, the part that had been holding everything together. She leaned in. So close I could feel her breath, taste the hesitation, the hope. The world blurred, the desk, the rain, the years between us. For one endless heartbeat, we hovered there, no titles, no roles, no rules. And then she whispered, barely audible, "God help me, Daniel." Her forehead rested against mine, and for that suspended moment, nothing else existed. Not fear, not reason, just the truth we'd been running from. When she finally spoke again, her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "We can't undo this." "I don't want to." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was raw, electric, real. And when she exhaled, slow, shaky, resigned, it wasn't surrender. It was understanding. They both knew now, whatever came next, they couldn't go back to who they were before. Morning came quietly, pale light spilling through the blinds, soft enough to blur the edges of everything. The world outside had started again, cars moving, voices in the distance, but inside that office, time still felt suspended. Elena sat on the edge of the desk, her hair falling loose around her face, one heel half off. The exhaustion on her face wasn't from lack of sleep, it was from feeling too much. I stood across from her, unsure what to say. The air between us was different now, calmer, fragile, real. "Do you regret it?" I asked finally. She looked up at me, eyes tracing mine like she was searching for something steady. "No," she said softly. "Do you?" I shook my head. "No. Just wondering what happens now." She smiled faintly, not the practiced, professional kind, but the small, tired smile of someone finally telling the truth. "I think," she said, "we stop pretending it's wrong to care about someone." I moved closer, slow enough for her to decide. She didn't move away. Her hand found mine halfway, hesitant at first, then sure. Her fingers were cold, but when I laced them with mine, I felt her pulse steady. You always do that, I said. What? Overthink the simplest things. She gave a quiet laugh, low, genuine. And you never think enough. I think about you, I said. That made her pause. For a second, she didn't breathe. Then she reached out, touched my cheek lightly, just her fingertips. You shouldn't say things like that if you don't mean them. I've never meant anything more. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was full, like air after rain. She leaned her head against my chest, eyes closing. My hand rested at the back of her neck, thumb tracing small, slow circles. We stayed like that, no urgency, no pretending the world would fall apart because of it. I was afraid of this, she whispered. Why? Because I didn't want to lose who I am. I kissed the top of her head, breathing her in, the faint scent of coffee, rain, and something entirely her. Maybe, I said quietly, this isn't about losing yourself. Maybe it's about finally finding someone who sees you. Her shoulders relaxed, the tension finally melting. When she looked up, her eyes were steady again, the same strength that had drawn me to her in the first place. We'll figure it out, she said. Together. I nodded, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Together, I repeated. Outside, the light brightened, the city alive again. But for that moment, it felt like the world had made space just for us. No grand declarations. No need for them. Just two people standing close enough to feel the quiet promise between heartbeats, that whatever storms came next, they'd stop running from them. She smiled, leaning her forehead against mine. You still owe me coffee, she said softly. And you still overthink everything, I murmured back. Her laugh was the first sound of the new day. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?